It is our experience as physicians that everybody is equally electrosensitive. You install this thing, measurably certain things in your health go down. You know, we tracking now, I say it here on TV, certain sensitive parameters of it. One is an inflammatory marker called TGF-beta1, goes way, way up as soon as the smart meter is installed. The MMP9, that's the metalloproteinases, go way, way up. These are inflammatory markers. The copper level in the serum goes up as a sign of chronic inflammation driven by something that's suddenly there. The hormones go way off. The neurotransmitters go way off. So we have lab tests that we can show. Here's the patient. We monitor him for 10 years before. He was completely normal. The smart meter was installed 6 months later. The patient looks like a dying patient from the lab work. And we find those changes even in people that say, well, my wife is sick since the smart meter's in there, but I'm totally healthy. But we look at the lab work, it looks just as bad. Yeah? So some people have an awareness of health and goodness in them, and other people don't. But from what our experience is that everybody is affected by it. It's not just a few 3% of electrosensitive people.
Did you hear about people coming to you as far as having complaints about illness?
We were made aware of health complaints following installation of smart meters, and we wanted to verify this using our field work. So I measured the field of about 30 different people while they stood 1 foot in front of the smart meter, and in every single case, the human energy field was obliterated as they stood in front of the smart meter. We wanted to then verify this at the physical level using dark field microscopy. And then we also did a control group to find out if the old analog meters had the same effect on the blood as the smart meter. So in our first slides, what we see is normal cells, and the structure of the cells is intact and sound. This is what we would expect from a normal sample. With the subject standing 1 foot in front of the analog meter, there were no significant changes to these blood samples in any of the 3 that we tested. In our second set of tests, we're using the smart meter. Before the exposure, we see the same thing as we saw in the first samples. Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells, and that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter. The good news in all this is the patient and the blood can return to normal once they have been removed from the influences of these stressors.
So this thing about electrosensitive, 3 or 5% of people are affected and everyone else is okay, I mean, what do you have to say about that?
There are changes whether they feel them or not. Maybe they're not out there complaining about it or trying to make other people aware of what it's doing to them, yet they're still being affected by it.
A considerable amount of research shows that developing brains and bodies of children are much more affected than adults. And there are clear indications of a link between increased electromagnetic fields and autism spectrum disorders.
We took 10 autistic children and went back to the sleeping location where the mother was when she was pregnant with that child, and compared it with the sleeping location of a mother that gave birth to healthy children. We had 10 mothers in that group, 10 mothers in this group, and in the group of the autistic children, we found that the measurements that we got for the microwave exposure was elevated compared to the group of children that were normal. The fetus is affected. The exposure to man-made electromagnetic fields has become the first factor that could be isolated ever in autism that could predict autism.
Despite industry's attempts to hide the truth, the science is done. There are very likely more studies that show a biological effect from electromagnetic frequencies, or EMF, than any other single area of focus in all of science. The site emfportal.org, as of late 2016, catalogs a whopping 23,800 studies. PowerWatch UK lists 1,659 studies on EMF. Of those, 1,032 found effects. A further 370 had other important insights or findings, and only 257 did not find effects. I began to reluctantly see the insanity exhibited by the actors within our captured government, prepared to risk everything, even their own children's futures. Globalist profiteers are fast-tracking agendas like smart meters and now 5G, so they can reap billions in the process of normalizing unlawful surveillance. I started wondering, how are our future generations being affected by this unprecedented increase in electromagnetic radiation?
I had a son that was going to school at San Diego State University, and he called me and he said, "Mom, I've got the worst headache." He says, "I'm projectile vomiting all over my apartment." And I said, "Get to the hospital." And the emergency room doctor at Sharps Memorial Hospital in San Diego called me, and he said, "Your son has bleeding in the brain." And I said, "We'll be there immediately." And my son had surgery that evening. When he got out, Dr. Tanawai told us that my son had brain cancer, and it was either the very worst or the second worst type of brain cancer you could have. It was nothing but chaos for 7 months. We moved him back home and had to pack everything that he owned in California and brought him home, and he only survived just shy of 7 months, and he died October 11th of 2008. August 7th of 2009, I typed in cancer clusters, and I saw SDSU, San Diego State University brain cancer cluster. And I read this article over and over, and I think it put me in shock, and I ended up on the floor for the rest of the day. But sorry. I realized they were talking about my son, so I immediately started contacting SDSU, the administration, and I felt myself just being bounced around. Nobody wanted to deal with me. So I got in my car and I drove out to San Diego for the whole month of October of 2009. And I went over onto the campus. In these articles, they talked about a cell tower. And I went over there, and there's this huge cell tower that's outside of this building, which towers above Nassatir Hall and room 131, where all these kids and people have come down with brain cancer. My son, Rich Farver, died October 11th of 2008, and he was in Nassatir Hall, room 131. Professor Charles Cutter died June 19th, 2008, Nassatir Hall, room 131. Lou Terrell, diagnosed with primary lymphoma brain cancer in 2008. He was in the room right next to room 131. Dwight Anderson died in 2008, Nassatir Hall. Miss Laurel Amtower died August 29th of 2010. Richard Funston died, and he was also located in Nassatir Hall, room 131. I just think that this wireless stuff, we just need to get a handle on it and warn the public. But I just want parents to know, And I want kids to know that these are very dangerous. And these are on many, many college campuses. A reporter from the San Diego Tribune that I had contacted actually called me at home, and he said, this story will never get out in San Diego. And I said, why? And he said, because of money.
So here's UPA installers crossing over locked fences and against consent.
On January 23rd, with premeditated malice and forethought, our city manager, in collusion with our city's administrative police chief, ordered an all-out assault on many of the citizens' personal property by cutting locks, illegally trespassing, threatening tax-paying citizens, mostly women and elderly, and actually arrested 2 of our stay-at-home moms on trumped-up charges for refusing installation of smart meters.
Get off my property right now. No! No!
When the full force of the city's police department is turned on its own people, it's time for a radical and immediate change.
Now, I just spoke with Naperville City Manager a few minutes ago, who says the city is within its legal rights to enter private property and install those smart meters. The meters, they say, are their property. He also says that the meters are safe. He also says the women deserve to be arrested if they violated the law. But exactly what those misdemeanor charges are, we still don't exactly know.